Okay, everybody, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and continue where we left off on our Rick and Morty drawing. Now, just a little bit of a review from what we discussed in our last session here. We've got really just the basic building blocks of our composition. And we took a little bit of time to kind of get some rough idea of what we wanted Rick and Morty to be doing, what their expressions in their face were, whatever our narrative is here in our, a pseudo illustration. At this point, whether you realize it or not, I'll kind of let you in a little bit of a clue. I've stepped away from this drawing for a couple of days and now come back to it a few days later and taking another look at it and reviewing what I've done already. I got to admit there's some mistakes here that have been made, and I want to do some tweaking as we move into the next phase of our drawing. A couple things to kind of point out here, and what I'll do is I'll just kind of get a nice color here so we can kind of circle it and make some notes on it. First things first, I'm not really happy with Rick's head here. His head shape is just a little bit off. It's not quite as pointed at the top and the bottom, so we'll make some corrections there, and that'll help make his hair look a little bit better when it comes time to address that too. Our perspective here is off on the gun, but we spent a lot of time talking about that in the last session, so we'll correct it here. This arm doesn't really line up right with the gun either. The fact of the matter is the elbow should appear a little bit lower, so the forearm goes a little bit like that to line up with the gun, and then we can have the upper portion of the arm come up like that. And notice if we do something like this, then our shoulders really don't line up. So we're going to have to kind of adjust all this area right here to get it to just look proper and I'll call it anatomically correct for lack of any better explanation. Morty's hairline here is a little bit off, so we'll kind of correct that a little bit. I would like to see the gun come out of the circle in the background, this little portal in the background. So I'm going to go into our background layer that has our portal in it, and I'm just going to select this and I'm going to shrink it down just a touch, just so I can get that overlapping that I was mentioning before. I think that's just going to work a little bit better with our composition there. And now that I've got that the way that I want, I'm going to go ahead and collapse all those layers together just to get it all as one little thing to work with, and I'm going to lower the opacity on that so I can start sketching over top of it. So there we go, a nice light sketch to kind of trace over top of. I'm in the layer above it now, and I'm going to be using my sketch pencil to start my next layer here. Now, the sketch pencil I discussed in the last video, so if you need some help with that, go ahead and make sure you check that out. Remember, we're looking at part 2 at this point, and I don't want to rehash information I've already covered, so go ahead and take a look backwards if you need to. All right. Now, sketch pencil, but I'm going to lower the size of this about halfway. I want to start getting a little bit more refined with my pencil work, and now we can go in and start sketching again. Now, I'm not so worried about the circle that's making up the portal. The fact of the matter is my light outline there is perfect as is, so I'm not going to rehash that over again. What I'm really interested in refining are my figures on the page. So let's get into it. I'm going to focus on Rick's head here for a little bit, and we're going to kind of zoom in and address the first thing I've already mentioned, which is I want to get the shape of his head a little bit more true to what it looks like when the artists, the animators, do it. So we're going to kind of just not make everything so pointed at the bottom there and at the top, and we'll kind of get ourselves a rough idea of where that ear is supposed to go, just like that. Okay, and I'm relatively happy with that. All right. And again, this is a relatively thick line. We've still got, even if we consider this to be our final sketch, we're still going to ink this, and we're going to pay a lot more attention to the thickness and thinness of our lines when we get into our inking layer a little bit later on. Line weight is what we generally use to kind of talk about that sort of concept, and line weight will definitely be the subject of our discussion when we get into the inking phase. For right now, everything's just going to get a similar line weight or line thickness, just to keep things easy. Remember, all I'm really looking for here is just to have a really, really good reference for when I get into that inking phase a little bit later on. All right, so there. Now, something I did here really quick is I used the circle feature, or this Procreate, or the auto circle feature, to kind of put in these eyes. Discussed that also in the last video, but just remember that it will allow you to kind of autocorrect into circles or perfect ellipses as long as you just keep the point of your pencil on the page and not lift it off immediately. It'll kind of do some self-correction for you. And I use this a lot when I do circles and curves and things like that, but it doesn't just come in handy for that. It does come in handy for straight lines as well. So let's take a look at that. And as a matter of fact, we can do it right now. I want to put a line here in his eye that kind of shows this little angle right here, right? But what if I wasn't very happy or very confident in how straight I could make the line on my own? What if I did have something that kind of wiggled around like that? Now that's been a little extreme, but Procreate will correct for that as well. So watch, as I come in here and I get a wavy line, and I'm going to hold my pencil on the page, I'm just going to stop moving forward with the mark, and it auto-corrects to a straight line for me. Now I'm not really happy where this is, so I'm going to go ahead and back that out, and I'll try it again. Look, curvy line goes straight. And not only that, but I can also adjust the length once it straightens it out for me, so I can get that right exactly where I want it, and leave it as is. And now I can do the same thing on the other eye. Again, crazy line here, but Procreate will straighten it out as long as I leave the tip of my pencil on the screen, and then I can make some adjustments on the fly, just like that. Okay, and I'll do something similar down here. And, you know, I'm relatively confident with my lines at this point, especially these little short ones like this. So I don't want to spend all day on this. Again, we'll hone in on some of the particulars when we get into the inking layer a little bit later on. But for right now, just want to kind of get, you know, everything kind of done nicely, but at the same time, I am in a little bit of a hurry. Now, not because time is a factor here, although I am conscious of how long this video is getting, but really just because the faster I go, the more loose of a feeling this whole piece gets. And when it comes to art, having a loose hand or a loose arm or a loose look to how your art goes on the page is important. A confident stroke might not be another way to kind of explain it. And it's this idea here that these strokes that I'm putting in right now, I'm not really spending a lot of time sketching it in like this, really, really slowly. I'm basically using my whole arm. I'm pivoting at the shoulder and sometimes at the elbow, but very rarely at the wrist. And I'm using my whole arm to get a sweeping motion in to get these big, broad strokes. And I'll do this with hair, I'll do this with arms, I'll do this all over the place. And what this helps accomplish for me, whether you realize it or not, is it gives it almost like a sense of life on the page. It is a very difficult thing to explain. We might even go so far as to call it the it factor, if that makes sense. But you can tell when somebody is painstakingly putting in lines like this. It looks stiff, it doesn't look lifelike, and your figure will not look lifelike as a result. They'll look very robotic. So the more you can get these nice sweeping lines in, look how natural that kind of looks. And again, I'm not really exactly trying to match the animation style of the cartoon perfectly, so don't hold me to that account, but I will tell you that these nice sweeping lines here do create a nice natural look for our figure. Okay, so I've got my head in here. I am missing my unibrow. Let me go ahead and just kind of put that in really quick. And again, we're going to nice sweeping line here to get a nice smooth curve in. And you know what? I'm not really happy with the way that looks. So this is something else we can take a look at as well. I want to use the layer stack to help me draw in this unibrow a little bit better. So let me go to my layer. I'm going to go in one above the head here. And I'm going to go ahead and sketch back in that unibrow. And I just want to make sure that I get it the way I want it looking. Not caring about what I overlap or how clean my line is or anything like that. Now, I'm relatively happy with that. I'm just going to make a couple little tweaks here to the end, just like so. But the problem is I got all this overlap, you know, over in here and over in here. So I want to take care of that by just having that understanding that those lines that I want to eliminate are in the layer below. So all I have to do is just kind of erase them out using the unibrow layer as a guideline of where I want to erase. So there you go, nice and simple. And then, you know, once I've got it where I want it, there we go, a little something like that. Now I can go ahead and collapse the unibrow into the rest of the head, and I've got something nice to work with. Now, let's go ahead and move that layer up. I want to layer underneath it. Let's go ahead and start working on the gun and the body. Remember, there were a lot of problems here. So now that I'm ready with the head, I'm going to make sure that I don't ruin anything with that head by separating it from the phase I'm about to move into with the torso and the gun. Since there are bound to be some additional mistakes here and some additional corrections, I'm separating the head from the rest, and I'll collapse it into the finished torso once I get to that point. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Back into a fresh layer here. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start with the gun, and or rather, you know what? Let's go ahead and just kind of roughen the body of the gun, and then we'll see how the arms and the hands fit into that in just a second. So we did have a lot of perspective problems here. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of try to sketch in a really rough idea of what I want the main body of this gun to look like. It is essentially some sort of a box that I'm trying to kind of assemble on the page and give it some sense of three-dimensionality. So I'm just going to be a little bit more particular about my lines at this point. I'll certainly make corrections as I go along here, but the idea in general is that I'm looking for something that's giving me an extreme perspective. So I'm really kind of making sure that I'm conscious of a vanishing point for this gun that, maybe it's off in here somewhere or something like that. But in this case, I'm going for a cartoony look, and I'm thinking that if I'm careful, I might just be able to just eyeball it myself. And again, what I really have in mind here is I'm trying to be conscious of how much time I'm spending on these videos. I don't want to give you something that's an hour long to look at. So I am going to kind of skip some of the really, really careful, time-consuming steps and not demonstrate them. But having said that, just keep in mind, if you have interest in the perspective tool, if this is something you'd like to learn a little bit more about, then say the word. Leave something in the comments, and I'll do a separate video just about the perspective tool and how it works in Procreate, if that's something that you can find helpful. All right. So that's roughly what I want my gun to look like. Now, I'm really kind of in very much an experimentation phase here. So I'm going to go to another layer here and get an idea of where this arm is supposed to lay, because we already established that that's kind of off too. So let's go ahead and we'll start sketching in the shoulder here, and we have an arm that comes down like so. Elbow's probably roughly about here. And you know what? Maybe we have the lower arm coming out like this, hand like this. And you can already see what's happening here, right? The gun just does not make sense in the spot that we put it. That's why we are doing these experimentations on different layers. I now have the ability to go back into that gun layer and just start moving things around. So maybe, there we go. That's looking a little bit better now, right? Keep it right there. And now let's go ahead and we'll create another layer, a third layer, if you will, and start getting an idea of where the hand that's cradling this gun is going to be. We got a finger wrapping around right here, one right here, one right here, and Rick's pinky finger, so to speak. We'll go right here. There we go. And maybe an elbow shoots out here somewhere. Notice again, I'm getting really rough with this, but I'm trying to keep things loose. And I can always go back later, lower the opacity, trace over with more refined lines when I feel like I've got something on the page that I'm happy with. So just trying to kind of finish up the rough idea of the lines, make sure that I have an idea of where everything goes. I'm not sure how happy I am with this hand right here, but I think it might be time just to kind of move on to the refining lines on the torso here and see if I can make that correction on the fly. So I'm going to take two of these layers, collapse them together, still leaving the gun a little bit separate here. Actually, I'm going to collapse the gun in two, that's fine. And we're going to lower the opacity, do some tracing over top of it, and see if we can't refine it a little bit more. All right. So again, I got my gun coming in here. Oh, make sure we're on a fresh layer. There we go. And gun comes in like this. There we go. And let's start getting the hand in there. Again, notice what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to get these nice quick lines in here. They're kind of sweeping motions more than anything else. Now, remember, if there's something I'm not happy with, all I have to do is just back it out and start over again. One of the great, cheats of the digital world of art is that you don't have to commit to any line you put down anymore. When I used to work in pencils and pen and ink and stuff like that, there was always that fear of getting a little bit too loose with your strokes, and then all of a sudden you've got something that doesn't belong, or you've drawn something at a wrong angle and you're stuck with it with very little ability to correct it. Certainly, things like erasers exist, and you make use of them as much as you can. But the problem with erasers is they often mark the paper. you'll see a lot of comic book artists, especially the real pros, have ways around this. They draw super light and they use rubber erasers to kind of remove pencil lines without putting too much of a mark on a heavier cardstock type page. The reason the professionals are able to kind of get away with this is because, number one, they've learned to draw super light, and that's just something I've always struggled with and I've never done very well. Pinky finger, a little bit shorter, right? So we'll just kind of do it like that. And there we go. Pretty happy with that hand. So anyway, as I was saying, I've always been kind of a heavy penciler. So even when I'm doing rough sketches, I tend to get really, really dark with it because it's just kind of how I get those nice flowing strokes of the pen in. The thing about that is, though, is again, the digital realm helps out with that because I always have the ability to lower opacity if I've drawn something in too dark. All my education on how I've learned to draw came from the traditional methods, though. Doing penciling and pen and ink with like markers and things like that. The point of the matter here is that when it comes down to it, uh, I struggle with that method quite a bit just because of the reasons I mentioned. I draw too dark. The eraser marks up the page. Cardstock that holds up to that kind of abuse could be very, very expensive. And when it comes down to it, I just wasn't willing to kind of like put so much time into something like 40, 50, 60 hours just to put down one stroke that didn't go down right. Now the whole thing is ruined. Now that might sound like I'm exaggerating a little bit when it comes to penciling, but that is very much the truth when it comes to inking. When you're getting into that inking phase, I've just never been very good at putting down a careful line and doing it with zero mistakes. And once it's inked, your only alternative is whiteout. And I've always thought that whiteout marred the page too. Now, the really interesting lesson here is that the professionals, they use whiteout. And they use it to various effects. I think probably the best example of this is Jim Lee. Jim Lee, inks a lot of his own work these days. He actually has a YouTube channel where he does demonstrations. Sometimes I publish live streams as well. And when he does his drawings on his channel and stuff like that, he will get into a phase where he's doing corrections and he'll pull out whiteout. But he uses the whiteout not just to kind of correct little errors in line work, but also as something to help part of the composition. Like he'll draw in, big, huge dots of white to represent snowflakes or something similar to that. He'll also use, little tricks like pieces of tissue doused in ink, and he'll use that to create like clouds or smoke or things like that. So, you kind of follow these little tricks as you go along here, but the beauty of it is that you have a whole lot of tricks at your disposal when it comes to the digital realm, because nothing is permanent. You can always take very easily one step backwards if there's ever a need to do so. There we go. Get the arm in like that. Elbow. Notice how I'm kind of flaring out the sleeve here. Good reason for this. Remember, this is kind of like the gun is going into perspective, so is this arm. And I'm exaggerating it quite a bit, but it's because I'm trying to go for a little bit of a extreme effect, so to speak. Now, here's the thing. I'm not sure I like that very much either. And this is why I kind of put this arm on its own separate layer. I want to clear this out, and I want to try something a little bit different. I'm going to take the shoulder right here, and I'm going to pull it back a little bit like this, and then bring the forearm up like this. So we are going to exaggerate this just a little bit more, I think. Again, let me just see how that works. So, got a rough idea of what I'm doing there. Try sketching that in. And again, I'm going to do the flare at the end here, although this is going to be too long. I am going to cut that down a little bit. You'll see why in a second. But just, again, get an idea of what I want here. Make this a little bit thicker. And then we have the torso will kind of pass through like this. So the arm is sitting out from the torso a little bit. All right, so let's get rid of the one piece of line we don't need anymore. And let's go ahead and lower the opacity on this. We'll trace over one more time, redefine our line, and then you'll see what we're kind of up to here, I think. So what my main concern here is making sure that we get some semblance of the gun with a hand and trigger. So I want the hand, or at least the first finger of this hand, to be roughly around here, and that'll be the trigger for this gun, which actually should be, I think, a little bit more over here. There we go. And then we have the other 4 fingers kind of overlapping here underneath the handle of the gun. Then we have a thumb. It'll come down like that, right? Problem is that it's not really kind of matching up to the way the gun is sitting on the page. So I am going to spend a little time on this, and this is where this might get a little bit boring here, but just remember, there's good cause for making sure that we do this and do it right, so we're not struggling with it in the color phase a little bit later on. So I do want the hand roughly about there, but I think you're going to see, when it comes down to it, a little bit more of the back of the hand here, and then less of the fingers over here like that. Again, it looks like a big scribble on the page, right? I do this a lot. This is just how I work out ideas, but I can always go back and kind of color over top of it with some new fresh lines and a new fresh layer, and just really kind of do the really what's I think more than anything else is the problem solving aspect of drawing. Make no mistake here, folks, if there's a problem-solving aspect of this that just has to be addressed at some point or another. There we go. I think I'm slowly getting this thing figured out. I'll put that hand right here, I think. Shrink it down a little bit. And I think the mistake I've also made here is that this hand over here on the other side is also a little bit too large. So let me just go ahead and I'm just going to select it. Second, made a mistake there. And we'll shrink it down. So, yeah, let me get rid of this. Let's go back to our gun layer here that we had the hand on. And I am going to shrink this hand down a little bit. I do tend to overdraw, or rather inflate the size of hands because it makes it a little bit easier for me to get in all the banana fingers I'm looking for. So that's going to look a little bit better there and a little bit more natural to Rick's proportions, I think. And again, we'll do some line correction in here a little bit later on. All right, so getting our hand in here. All right, and then we'll have a trigger of some sort coming down right here. And these will just kind of overlap. There we go. Thumb. Open sleeve. Going back to elbow. How's that look? Just throwing a little bit of detail here on the gun. We'll be collapsing layers here in just a second anyway and redrawing the whole thing just because I'm still not quite happy with some of the line work here. So again, I'm getting real loose with it because I want to start making some decisions here on the fly about where certain lines go, and certain lines I'm not happy with I want to start kind of erasing out since I don't have any real commitments to this anymore. And this idea where I can kind of go back and work on things over and over and over again may seem very monotonous, but it's an effective method for me because it helps me experiment. It helps me, take stuff and say, okay, well, I'm not going to get so caught up on this knowing that it's not the final pass. And since it's not the final pass, I can feel free to loosen up a little bit and make some of those, and I hate to use this term again, but happy accidents that kind of come along when you're not so worried about things, that you can get a little bit more confident with some of your strokes. Okay, so let's see here. Not quite happy with the forearm there, but I think we're close. A little more something like that. There we go. I think we got something. All right. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this so far, other than the fact that it's just a little bit sloppy, and I think maybe actually we can move this arm just a touch. There we go, something like that. All right, now let's just combine this all together, and we'll make this the layer again that we're going to lower the opacity on and start drawing over again. All right, one more time I think on this we might work. Let's just go ahead and lower the size of our pencil here one more time, so that way our line work looks nice and clean. And that way, when we get to our final product, we'll know when we see it, because the line work will kind of sing it for us, so to speak. I'm kind of getting a little punch drunk here. Sorry about that. All right. I'm going to try to resist the temptation here of going back into the editing phase of this video and speeding up any of this content. One of the great things about YouTube, I think, is that you do have the ability to rely pretty heavily on that fast forward button if you find that some of this content is getting a little bit monotonous for you. So as much as I'd like to discourage that, I will tell you that if you find that this isn't going fast enough for you and you're ready to move into the next phase, feel free to hit that fast forward button. But look, let's make a deal. If you're going to fast forward, at least make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and hopefully that like button also. All right. So let's see here. Let's start a new layer here just in case I want to move the tip of that gun a little bit later on. And get the rest of the body here sketched in pretty quickly. Again, one of the other things that it might be handy to point out is that even though this might seem a little bit monotonous, once you get into the fourth, fifth, or sixth version of your rough sketching, notice how quickly these lines go in now, because you're really just kind of building confidence in the piece every time you take another pass. So in the last video, I said it before. I'll kind of mention it again because I think it's an important thing to kind of make note of. Is that if you're afraid to erase something and start over again, well, then you're kind of defeating the purpose of trying to enhance your drawing through practice. Good drawing, especially with the subject matter you're familiar with, is really kind of a matter of building up muscle memory. Probably the best example of this I can think of is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I know sounds a little bit silly, but when I was a kid, when I was in the 7th grade, I became obsessed with Ninja Turtles, like I think probably most boys did when they hit roughly past 6th or 7th grade. We all kind of go through, all boys, maybe some girls too, but a lot of the boys I grew up with got obsessed with Ninja Turtles around the same age. But at any rate, I really enjoyed the comic books. I loved watching the cartoons and so on and so forth. And because, I was taking an interest in drawing, it was just a natural conclusion that I was going to try to draw Ninja Turtles myself. So what do? You get the references from the comic books and the cartoons and stuff like that, and you use those to help inform how you lay down the lines and and so on and so forth. But the problem is that you never get it right the first time. This is how you learn. So you keep at it and you keep at it, and this is exactly what a young, tenacious 7th grade aged boy did with his obsession over Ninja Turtles. Is that fail once, do it again, and keep doing it over and over and over again, and using those comic books and the cartoons as a guide of what the good finished product looks like. And so, long story short, I've drawn thousands of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in my adolescence, and even though it's many, many years later, I can still draw them, and draw them pretty effectively, because that muscle memory has never just totally gone away. Uh, I kind of feel silly sitting here talking about Ninja Turtles and not drawing any. And frankly, I don't think I have any Ninja Turtles anywhere on my channel. And maybe it's because I kind of oversaturated my need for turtles back when I was a teenager. But I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. If you want to see Ninja Turtles, let me know in the comments, and I will see about maybe getting something like that in there soon. All right, so let me just simplify this elbow here a little bit. And I think we've almost got something on this side of the body, right? I'll make sure my lines all connect together really good here. I want everything to have a nice flow to it, a certain sense of three-dimensionality too, but I think we're kind of getting there, all right? Very, very happy so far, and so happy I'm just going to keep on cruising on the same layer without making any changes yet. I still want to add some more detail to this gun, though. I mean, we've got basic shapes, and that's all well and good, but I really want to make this look kind of futuristic and from some sort of a dimension other than Earth. So I want to kind of put some like little, lights and buttons and just like little hacky little details into it, just to make it look a little bit more fancy. Maybe I'll put a line right here, line right here. Something like that to maybe indicate maybe some ventilation that's might needed for the gun to discharge or something like that. Maybe we'll put some sort of a cutaway right here, just to give it again some detail. And actually what I'll do here is I'll get that detail a little bit more by actually lowering this line and making it very clear that there's some sort of a detail element going on in this gun that hopefully reads as something important to its function. There. And let's see here. There. Something like that. Okay. And what we can also do is we can take the butt end right here. Maybe we'll add like a little cutaway right there too. Just give you some idea that there's something kind of hidden here that the arm is hiding, but it gives it again a little bit more complexity in its shape. And we'll even throw in a little button here next to the hand. All right, so we'll go to another layer and we'll start just making sure that we can get this nice refined looking hand here. I'll be honest about this. Just I think like most artists, I struggle sometimes with hands. They're very, very odd pieces of the human body that can really conform into a lot of different shapes very easily. And trying to get those shapes to look natural, at least for me, can sometimes be a challenge. Now, what do you do with a challenge? Well, you just keep, at it until you learn. Make the mistakes, learn from the mistakes, and if necessary, draw until you get it right. This one, I'm relatively happy with. All right, so I'm going to kind of keep it as is. Just refine a couple of my lines here a little bit. Erase some of the stuff I don't need. And I think I'm going to kind of flow with that. But why am I happy with it? For the most part, because I've already drawn it about 6 or 7 times, just in trying to get the composition of this drawing in place that I was happy with it. So again, when you get into some of these final drawings here, they don't take the painstaking amount of time that they did when you originally started, messing around with your composition and figuring out where things were going to go. Once you get into this, however many passes this is, the lines become more confident. You know where everything's going. A lot of the problems have been solved, and you can kind of go through this a lot faster. Now, I did kind of talk a little bit earlier about problem solving. Let me just kind of follow up on that. Some of the greatest compositions I've ever had in my head weren't necessarily fully figured out when I got into the drawing phase. At some point, in just about any composition or any art piece that I've ever put together, I got faced with a problem. How does this arm work? What does it look like if I do it like this? Would a shadow fall in this area? And if it did, what would it look like? These sorts of things. So at the end of the day, I come to this conclusion here that a certain amount of being an artist, whether professional or amateur or otherwise, really just kind of comes with a skill in trying to figure out how to do basic problem solving, how to get something to work, even though it may not be working perfectly at the time. All right. Right here, I'm kind of facing that right now. I know I've got to kind of give some perspective here to this forearm, but if I'm not careful with how I do it, what I'm going to end up with is an arm that looks like the forearm is way too short compared to the upper arm, and it just will look ugly to the eye. Your brain will just get turned off by it, and it'll be something that draws your attention rather than just be some casual element of it that's unnoticeable. So I am going to spend a little time on it, but I think I'm mostly there. One of the things I'm going to point out here is that some of this is going to get corrected when we get into the coloring phase. What I mean by that is that when we get into coloring, we are going to use some shadow and light to help enhance the perspective I'm trying to achieve. So we're not completely dead in the water yet with how this is going to look when the final product is done. I'm going to just kind of make sure that I got a little bit more detail on the trigger of the gun here. Make sure my lines are lined up just a little bit better. But I think we are almost there. That line should come down here. That line should come down here, which means the trigger would line up like this. There we go. Just define that a little bit better, and we're almost there. Again, I'm not afraid to just erase all that and start it over if I'm not happy with it. Those lines are getting a little thick and a little sloppy, and I don't want to go back and do this whole drawing all over again. I think I've kind of done it enough at this point. So I'm just going to kind of work with what I have and use that, erase tool if necessary, because I'm really happy with the way everything else is looking right now. So just gotta, there we go. There we go. Just drawing boxes and squares. That's really all I'm doing. Just kind of keep that in mind. Anytime you get a little intimidated by the detail, just break it down to what it is. It's boxes, rectangles, sometimes a little circle here and there. Get our little thumb in, just like so. There we go. All right. Let's go back in. We'll lay in that shoulder. Now that we're happy with our arm, shoulder leads to the collar of the coat. And look, I got to tell you, this is another one of those muscle memory things. I've drawn enough suit jackets with these odd collars that the lines on the lab coat are really kind of just very old hat to me. Something I've done a million times before. And I think it also comes with the experience of being somebody that's dressed like that too. In a previous life, I was one of those guys that worked in an office wearing suits and ties every single day. And because I'm very familiar with the process of putting on a tie and putting on a jacket, and, doing that on a daily basis over and over and over again, when it comes time to draw a suit and tie, it's really not even so much muscle memory as just remembering this is what it looks like because I wore it every single day. I'm really happy with a lot of this line work, so I'm going to go ahead and start collapsing some of the torso stuff in together, so that way when I want to go back and make some tiny little edits here, I'm not like forced to choose which layer I'm on. Let's see here. So yeah, mostly happy with this, right? Let's go ahead and we'll finish sketching in some of the other elements, like we have, back of his arm here we're going to get in. Honestly, that forearm might be a little thick. I want to readdress that a little bit later, but in the meantime, I want to get his torso down here. Get some of the other elements lined up, like so. And just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to create another layer here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a nice, thick, like kind of scattered line as to where I want his body to end and his entrance into the portal to begin. And now that I've got that laid in, I'll go back to that torso layer and just erase the edges of the line at the bottom here that I don't need anymore. And once I got that done, I can go ahead and collapse those two into each other. And I think that's a decent place to kind of leave this for right now. We've certainly got to address the Morty figure and finalize his sketch, and I think we'll do that in another session. So I hope you enjoyed what you saw here today. Just go ahead and make sure you hit that subscribe button and the like button as well. Stay tuned for part 3, and we'll be taking a look at Roughing Out Morty. Thanks.